welcome back to Yerushalmi Terumot. The share is a chus for all those who need shidduchim. We are up to Zayin Amud Aleph. Reb Masna said the Mishnah Megillah that the Cheresh can't read the Megillah is like the view of Reb Yossi. So the Gemara brings another opinion about this. Amar Rav Chisda said less kan Cheresh. The correct wording, really, of that Mishnah, take out. We don't include Cheresh amongst people who are possible to read the Megillah. It's only a fool and a child. Now, why it says Cheresh there? Well, Ashkerat Lashani Masnisa. It's because usually they're put together, Cheresh Rishos V'Katan, and therefore the Talmidim brought the word in, but really it shouldn't be there. Now, it could be the reason why you read out the word Cheresh or leave it out. But maybe you held that, what Rabbi Yossi said is not really Shabbat and Megillah. Maybe with Krishma, maybe there's a problem, but not with Megillah. And maybe that's why I didn't want to have the wording with Cheresh in it, which Rabbi Yossi says the problem with the Girsa. Maybe he's only talking about Krishma. Maybe Rabbi Yossi doesn't apply to this as far as that Mishnah, which our Mishnah talks about Truma at the end of the day. So maybe that's nothing to do with it, because maybe only with Truma is a problem. Maybe with the Megillah is not a problem, only Krishma. But anyway, our Mishnah nevertheless said we're going in the view of Rabbi Yossi, and it's not like Rav Chisda. Now Rav Chisda could be he agrees to our Gemara. Let's see, Rav Yossi, Mistabra Yoda Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda would agree to our Mishnah B'Trumas, the Hid Rav Yossi. That is the view of Rav Yossi. Right? Rav Chisda also agrees Rav Yossi applies to all mitzvahs, right? Not just Shema, all mitzvahs. Okay, he left out the word Cheresh from Megillah, that's for some other reason. Megillah is the exception, right? That if he can speak, he can read the Megillah, even if he can't hear it. But it could be other mitzvahs how similar to Truma. Okay? A Cheresh Stam, usually, is someone who can't speak and can't hear. Now this Cheresh, we're not discussing if he's kosher to read the Megillah, because if he can't speak, he can't read the Megillah. Right? He can't read it at all. Right? Okay, so obviously it can't be that Cheresh that we're talking about. No, you should say that our Mishnah is the Rabbi Yossi. Now, our Mishnah mentioned 5 people shouldn't take Truma. And we said if they did, it's not valid. Now, we didn't include in them the Cheresh who's able to speak. So he's not included in that list. Now, if you're going to tell me in the 5, Truma is not valid even b'di'eved, whereas Cheresh who speaks, maybe it would be valid b'di'eved, so that's why I didn't include him in the list. But then there's a following Mishnah in Daf Yud Beis, another 5, which ideally they shouldn't take Truma, but if they did, it's valid. Now Cheresh wasn't mentioned there either. It wasn't mentioned in the 5 where b'di'eved is no good, and it wasn't mentioned with the 5 where the Chatzchila is no good. Why didn't we mention it there? You have to say the din of Cheresh who speaks, who can't hear, is the view of Rabbi Yossi, and that's why the Mishnah didn't include it with the other 5 cases which are according to everyone. So that's why we didn't want to mention it. Okay, now the halacha with Cheresh. Taman Tanina, we've learned in Chagiga, everyone has to come to the Beis HaMikdash for the 3 festivals and bring Korban Olas Re'iyah. Chutz mecher shofet v'katan, the fool who shofet v'katan are potel from Re'iyah. Chavraya b'shem Rebbe Elazar. Now it says in the mitzvah of Hakel, leman yishma'u, leman yilmadun. Right? If you can't hear, you're potel from Hakel, and you're also potel from mitzvah Re'iyah, which we learned from Hakel, Gzer Shava. Ad kedun, that's all very well. Medaber v'einu shemea. I understand he can speak and can't hear. It's no leman yishma'un. But what about someone who's shemea v'einu medaber? He can hear but not speak. Rav Hira v'shem Rebbe Elazar, he said, Rebbe Elazar, leman yilmadun, leman yilamadun, as if it's written yilamadun. So also someone who hears and who can't speak, he can't teach others. You hear that? If he can't speak, he can't teach others. Well, he can't properly teach others. So it comes up, when the Mishnah Chagiga says a Cheresh is potter from Re'iyah, it doesn't mean a proper Cheresh who can't do anything, but even a Cheresh who can speak and can't hear, or hear and can't speak, they're also potter from Re'iyah. So then Rav Yonah, Adar Amra, this tells me, the less klaloi, the Rebbe klalin. The usual rules that Rebbe fits in the Mishnah are not general klalin that are always the case. There are exceptions where the Tana didn't bother mentioning the exceptions. The Tanina, we've learned in our Mishnah, He can speak and can't hear. Lo yisrael, shouldn't take truma. And the usual case is he can't hear and can't speak. So Rina Meima, with Mrs. Re'iyah, we want to say that even Shomea Ve'eda Medaber, even if it's just one of them, he can hear and not speak, he's also Cheresh, he's included in the Cheresh of Mrs. Re'iyah, and therefore he is Pasul. And Medaber Ve'eda Shomea is also Cheresh. So also one who speaks and can't hear is also a Cheresh here. So usually a Cheresh is someone who can't do both. But here it's not someone who can't do both. Here it's someone who might not be able to do one of them, and is also possible. So you see the klal of our Mishnah that usual cheresh is proper cheresh, can't hear, can't speak. That's not always the case. There are cases where there are exceptions to the rule. Okay? The Babli argues on Rabbi Yonah and holds the klal of our Mishnah is muchlat. Whenever it says cheresh tam, it's a proper cheresh who cannot hear and cannot speak. Right? And the Gemara there has to change the wording in the Mishnah in the Chagiga. The Gemara has to go to town to explain the Mishnah differently. But that's what the Bavli holds, therefore, that is a specific general rule always, whereas we're saying no, it doesn't. It's not always the case. Okay. V'atanina. We bring another raya for this. Mrs. Chalitza. Cheresh shecholatz. If a cheresh does chalitza, v'acharesh is shecholza, either the yavam or the yuvama, they did charisha. There were cheresh people, there were mute people at the time of chalitza. But chalitza is leyavam. If the yavam is young, chalitza psukim is not valid. Amar Yochanan, v'she'eni yechonin. They can't say the psukim. They have to say when the husband says, "I didn't want to take her." But Amar, you can't say because so should be done to the man who won't build the house of his brother, etc. Right? So that's why when the Mishnah says they're possible for chalitza, we're not proper cheresh who can't speak and can't hear. It's even someone who can hear and not speak. They're also possible. Now, Tanina, we've learned, usually what is a cheresh? He can't hear and can't speak. And yet here, we're saying he can do something. That supports Rabbi Yonah Amar, Amar the last Klaled to Rabbi Klalin. Rabbi's rules are not always 100% accurate. There are exceptions to them. So even though cheresh normally is someone who can't speak and can't hear, but you have cases where only one of them applies. He can't speak, but he can hear. And then you see that from the Mishnah in Yevamis. He just says cheresh, but it doesn't mean a proper cheresh. A child who's not shown signs of maturity. Truma, he can't take truma. Rabbi Yehuda said he can. Rabbi Yossi said if he's 12, the boy is 12, then it's not valid. After 12, when he's older than up to 12, it's not valid. From 12 onwards, it's valid. He's not, his truma is not effective. This is Rameir's view. This is a new opinion. Rameir's, it's not truma, he has to show signs of maturity. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda b'shem Rabbi Hillel, because it says in the Torah, separating truma v'leitisu alav chait, you will not bear a sin. If you do the mitzvah properly, someone who can be punished by doing a sin. If he didn't separating truma, Torah, he can take truma. But if he's too young, he can't take truma. They ask if he didn't take truma from the best, right? He's not chayav to take truma at all. So he can take truma. The afresh of truma depends on your thought. Someone whose thought helps with the words of the Torah, he can take truma. If you don't have machshava that helps to create dinim, like a child whose machshava can't help without an action, so he cannot take truma. It sounds like even though, let's say, the boy is 12, his machshava doesn't help. Rameir, even if he's 12, he can't take truma. His machshava doesn't help. Then the Gemara asks, Hatzibon Haregoi, Shein Kasba Machshava, there's no reference to machshava time and he can take truma. They have no thought to help. Nevertheless, they are permitted to take truma. And you see how precious truma doesn't depend on machshava at all. Taman, the brayse of which he learned, the machshava doesn't help lehachshe, to enable food to be susceptible to receive truma. Because the Torah says, Yutan Maimar Zera Tamehu, the word lachem, a Jewish person's machshava can create that status, and now it's muksha to receive truma. Whereas kan le truma. Here it's talking about truma. With truma, there's no source to say the machshava won't help. There's no reason to passel from separating truma. Whereas a child has got no machshava for anything. Therefore, Mahoz, we pass at him from separating truma. Now, Tanoim argue if a child can separate truma. What about, can a child make an animal holy for a korban? According to the Tanu who says he can't make truma, Eda Magdish, he can't make an animal holy either, even though he's 12. But now why not? Just say the opposite. The one who says he can take truma, he can make hekdesh. Why he said the one who can't take truma can't make hekdesh. But why not say the one who can take truma can make hekdesh? We begin to Yehuda because of the Yehuda. Yehuda said that Tyrain, even though he's 12, he can take truma, and yet Eda Magdish, he can't make something hekdesh. Right? Even though he can make Nedarim, he can't make something hekdesh. So you see, the ones who hold he can take truma, you might think, oh, he can make hekdesh, but you can't say that because Rabbi Yehuda makes a distinction between the two, right? According to Rabbi Yossi, a child who's 12, he can be mafresh truma and he can make hekdesh as well. Rabbi Yochanan, even according to the one who says a child can't take truma, which is Rameya, nevertheless a child can be magdish, he can make an animal holy for a korban when he is 12. Umar magdish, what korban can he make holy? Ayla Ushlamim. These are not obligation offerings, right? Therefore, you can magdish them. Lahavi chatzas chaylev, to include chatzas chaylev, a normal chatzas ein yochel. He can't do that. She'en chatzas chaylev. A child is not obligated to bring a korban for eating chaylev. He's not chayav b'mitzvahs. He can't be magdish a chatzas, so he's not obligated. And chatzas dam. A chatas for blood any yachal, she'ein lo chatas dam. He has no chiyuv to bring a korban for chatas dam on isur on eating b'shoigeg. Okay, so the child can't bring any of those. He can only bring maybe an oila or shlamim. Now, what about mal sheyavi? Can he bring if he's 12 korban ziva, a ziva korban, the korban saras, types of saras? Right? Are we going to tell me machashul chayva? Now these are obligations. You have to bring them to become tired. Therefore, a child Aina maybe he can't be magdish and bring them because he's patur from any chiyuvim, and you can't be magdish a korban which is an obligatory one. He's got the tumah side of it, and he can't go in the mikdash until he brings his korbanos. Therefore, he can be making hekdesh and bring his korbanos. One thing should be clear: if he's tameh with these tumas, he has to bring korbanos to purify himself. Shehu maybe. One thing's sure, he can bring these korbanos even once he's reached an age of 12. So it should be obvious to you, look, if he can be tameh with these saras, then he has to bring a korban to purify himself. Right? Ma sheyaseh behen shliach. Can a child make a shliach? Can he be a child? Sorry, can he be a shliach? To be magdish for someone else, these korbanos? Do we say, ma'achashu metameh behen? Look, he can become tameh with these things, and he can bring korbanos for himself. So the same thing, he can be a shliach for others. Or maybe he can't be a shliach for other things, therefore he can't be a shliach for the korbanos. His fruit has got a din of tevel, right? He's not taken the tithes. Nevertheless, according to everyone, Eino Pater is Tivla. You can't pater the tevel of anyone else. Right? Even if you can say separate truma for yourself, you can't pater a tevel of someone else. So our Torah, according to the Torah, because truma is compared to the din of shliach to the mshalach. Someone who's mitzuva in truma, like the mshalach, could be a shliach. They can, and as with Kobana, Ziva, and Saras, Avishu Mitameben, yes, he can have the Tumah aspect, and he can separate them. Nevertheless, Ein an Asa Shliach can't be a Shliach for others to make Hekdesh their Kobanas. But the Din Shliach throughout the Torah is learned from Truma, so only someone who's Mitzvah in the mitzvah, like the Mishalech, can become a Shliach in that regard. Mal Shayavi, can someone who's 12 bring Bikurim from the fruit that grows in his field? Rabbi Yehuda to Amar, according to Rabbi Yehuda, who said the Bikurim is Hukish Lekot Shagvo is compared to Truma, Eina maybe. So he can't bring Bikurim, just like he can't bring Truma. Okay? There's actually an argument, the Mishnah in Bikurim brings an argument who they give Bikurim to. Some say give it any Cohen you want. The Torah calls it Truma, it's compared to Truma any Cohen you want. Chachamim hold you give the Bikurim to the Kohanim of the Mishmah who were working at that time in the Beis HaMikdash. It's compared to Korbanos. Okay, so what we got here, we compared to Kachagvol, And Eina maybe doesn't bring Bikurim, just like he can't bring Truma. Rabbanan do Amrin, according to the Chachamim, who say Huk should have Kadshay Migdash, Bikurim is compared to Korbanos, maybe he can bring Bikurim just like he can be Makdish an animal for a Korban. Ma'ashi Avi Chagiga, a child who is 12, can he be Makdish and bring Korban Chagiga? Do we say Me'achashu Chayva, since it's an obligation, Eina maybe, so he can't bring it? Or maybe Me'achashu Mishaneu, since he can change it, the Shem Shlamim, he can change it for a Shlamim, maybe, therefore he can bring it. Just like he can bring a Shlamim. Very good question. We have no answer. Ma'alavi Pesach. Can a child who's reached the age of 12 be Magdish and bring Korban Pesach? Do we say Ma'acha Shuchayva Layavi? There's an obligation he can't bring it. And Ma'acha Da'am Hashem and Lakish Hashem reviewed the Nesiyah. Maybe out of Pesach Shayim Masashon of Chanel Hashem Shlamim, bring a Pesach the rest of the year and call it a Shlamim. So you see a Pesach is really a Shlamim. Therefore, yeah, maybe he can bring it. Just like he can bring a Shlamim. Very good question. We have no answer. He says, according to many Rishonim, he can't be makriv and Korban Pesach for himself or for a group of children, unless he's got at least one adult in that chabura. Right? But the Pesach is mainly a Korban Chayva. You're going to have at least someone with a proper chiyuv. Okay. Ma'ashiyavi Masa Behema. A child who's reached 12 can be Magdish an animal bring Masa Behema. In his book Rameya, if he holds Rameya, if Rameya holds Mikol Masva Sechem, tells me Hukshu Masva Zelazeh, they're all compared. Shem She'enoi Ma'aseh Dogon. A child can't do Masa of grain. Which Rameya Kacheinoi, so also can't bring maybe Masa Behema. He can't bring Masa Behema either. Ma'olas is Tamura. A child who's 12, if he transfer holiness from one animal to another, does it work? Well, it's absolutely forbidden to do so, but if he did, if you put Kedusha from one animal onto another, Shmura, does it work? In Saramei, from Me'al Zuk Shukanamai, is all compared to one to the other. Yishem She'enim maybe Master Dagon. He doesn't bring Master of grain. Kacha maybe Master Behema. He can't bring Master Behema. Shem She'enim maybe Master Behema. Just like he can't bring Master Behema animal. Kacha Ois and Tzmura. He can't make it Tzmura for it. Because the Din Tzmura and Master Behema are very close together in the Parsha. If he spoke of Shimon, if he holds like Shimon, Amar Master Behema, Limon al Kol Kodshim Tzmura, it tells me all animals we look at Tzmura, as far as the Din of Tzmura, and we compare it to all animals. So then we should take the drasha wider and say, Kashem She'ena maybe Master Dagon, just like he doesn't bring grain, Kachena maybe Master Behema, he doesn't bring Master Behema either. Kashem She'ena maybe Master Behema, just like he doesn't bring Master Behema. I said Tzmura. He can't make it Tzmura of a Master Behema. Shem Shein Mema Beh, you can't make it Tzmura of it. Kachena Mema, you can't transfer B'chol Kodshim, so you won't be able to do anything. You won't be able to transfer any Kedusha. Now what about Korbanos, which a child made holy, where he's reached Einus and Dorim, right? He's 12. Mashu Chayovin al Kodshim B'chutz. What's the end if someone who shechs chutz d'azara, an animal Kodshim where a child made it holy, is he Chayav Kores? Kahana Amai says in Chayovin al Kodshim B'chutz. No, you're not Chayav, one who shechs outside the azara, an animal which the child made holy. He's no Kores. Because the hektish of a child is only midrabanan. Rabbi Yechon and Shlakish Amrin, they said Chayovin. You are Chayav al Kodshim B'chutz. Right? If you shecht outside the azara, you are Chayav. Because if he's 12, it's Chal Min HaTorah. When the Gemara says, he says, when a child is 12, many times says he can bring various korbanos. They're fitting to be brought in the Azara. It's not Chulin bi Azara. This is the view of Yochanan, who holds that hekdesh of a child is Chal Min HaTorah. Okay. V'adada Kahana Pliga Rabbi Yossi. This din of Kahana goes against the Tana Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi said a child who's 12, the neder is a valid neder, hekdesh is hekdesh. Paites tibla, he can pater the tebel through hafrosha of maisrus. It sounds like the hafrosha helps to Torah, even a Torah. But tema okay. And can you tell? How can you tell me that it's only with Rabbanon, the hekdesh of a child who's reached Einus and Dorim is only with Rabbanon? So my answer is Rabbi Yossi holds Commander Amar, like the one who holds that at the time of the second base mikdash, Melen Kibla Len, they took upon themselves willingly the chiyuv of Trumas and Maestros. Men HaTorah it was Batel, right? When the first temple was Batel, when they went into exile. Therefore, since the separating of Truma this time is only rabbinical, therefore Rabbi Yossi is Mashir truma of a child if he's after the age of 12, even though it won't help Minan Torah, but he'll still be proper truma, or at least Rabbanan truma. Okay, halacha base. Ein tomin zeisim ala shemen v'novim ala yain. You shouldn't separate olives for oil and not grapes for wine. So what's he got? He's got olives. He's got oil. It's all tebel, or grapes, and wine, which is tebel. You can't separate some olives as truma for the olives and the oil, or some of the grapes for the grapes and the wine. In Terumot, if you did, the Yerushalmi Terumot Daf. Now, Frosha is only chal on the olives and the grapes. They become chulin, but the oil and the wine remains tebel. They still remain trumas and truma. They still say it's not effective. It's not chal, even on the olives and the grapes. Right? So you should not be taking truma olives for oil or grapes for wine. Right? These things are going to be... Huh?
That's a different product.
The reason is because of the bother. So the Mishnah is talking about separating truma from olives or grapes, which is going to be pounded to take out the oil. They're not completed yet. Why can you not separate truma al shem and mayayin? You should separate truma from something which is completed for something which is completed. And let's say olives and grapes for wine and oil is like hafrosha for something not yet completed for something which is completed. Okay? That's learned from Kadaga, Minagoren. Right? So you should separate from things which is complete from things which is complete. Okay. Taman Tani, where are we? Taman Taninan, Ein Taimin Midaba. Shadig Mamalachta, no, Shaladig Mamalachta. Don't do trauma something complete for something not complete. Nor from something not complete for something complete. And if you did, it's trauma. But here in our Mishnah, you're saying this, but then what? You're taking truma from olives for oil or grapes for wine. That it's like not complete for something which is complete. It shouldn't be effective. But the Eved, it shouldn't work at all. According to Beis Hillel, it shouldn't work. Rav Yochanan, he says the case of our Mishnah, when you're separating olives for oil, grapes for wine, it's the knas. Why doesn't it work? B'bnei gezel hashevet. Because you are stealing from the Kohen. You hear that? You're stealing from the Kohen. What do you mean? What loss is there here? What loss is there? If you take truma from olives for oil, there is a loss of the Kohen. Now, Tairach, all the bother he has to produce the oil from these olives and the wine from the grapes. But then wait a minute. Tries to Sa'ira Shal Eirez. There was a bit of rice there where the husk hadn't been taken off with a bit of bother. And you separated, let's say, for rice, which is being pounded. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, it should be the din, but the Eved is not valid. And yet we didn't mention it in our Mishnah. We didn't mention this case. He says, when it comes to pounding rice, it's only a small bother. Right? A Cohen is happy to take it while it's in its shell and ground it a bit, according to what he needs, and therefore, b'di'evad, the truma is valid. It's not the same as olives and grapes, where there's a much bigger bother to produce the oil and the wine. He says, wait a minute. The grain, it might be long ears of corn which have not been threshed. Right? It's big bother. You separated them for the tzvur, which is already complete. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, it should be not valid. And yet the Mishnah doesn't mention it. The Mishnah only mentions olives and grapes. So he says, Ad kan kasher Chananya. This was the question Rav Chananya asked on the answer of Rav Yochanan. So he actually asked this question, right? We don't actually answer the question. The Rambam seems to explain the knas is because of the bother that the Cohen has, and that remains. The Rambam paskened 3 things that are not completed their malacha. The hafrosha is only it's because of the terach of the Cohen. So shibodim of wheat, olives, of oil and grapes and the wine. So the main hesper, we're worried about the bother of the Cohen, right? And we'll give examples here of things which have a bother. But the same thing with shibodim of truma is not chal because there's a bother. Okay. Ad kan kasher v'chananya. Ramana layamake. Ramana didn't explain like Hanania what Gezel HaShevet, right? He wanted to say Gezel HaShevet, you're giving him all the bother that you're giving him. He didn't want to say this. Let's see here. Yeah. It could be, he says here actually, the bother of taking oil out of olives, even if it's those that are there to be eaten, that they've already had their Gemar Malacha. But you want to take Truma for oil, the Cohen has a right to receive oil. Okay? Alright, so what we got here? Ramana Loyamakin. He didn't explain like Hanania what Gezel Shevet. Ella, he explained like this. When he's separating Truma for oil, Umavakesh, he's required litron lefi shemen, Truma for oil, and you have to look at the oil output, right? You're separating Truma with the amount for the oil. And when you're taking olives for oil, you're only doing it based on the olives. You'll make a mistake. You'll separate according to the volume of the olives. Right? And since the oil's viscosity, is that the right word? The oil, is that the right word? The denseness or the volume of the oil, might be this viscosity, I don't know. That is less than the What?
It's less than the volume of the olive.
It's less than the volume. He says like this. You're making a mistake, right? Because he says the oil is less than the one of the olives where it comes from. So if you start thinking about the shir truma or mafresh based on the olives, instead of thinking about the oil, you're going to give the Cohen less oil than what you are obligated. So you're over on Gezel HaShevet. He says, he says, wait a minute. Shetaram, you took truma of olives of oil, lefi shemen, according to the amount of oil. So there's not really, so you did enough. You had in mind how much oil there is. You had it in mind. In this situation, it should be valid. And Mishnah's mother, Mashma, is not valid. But you've done enough. You've got enough. So more answers. Kedun Ovad Kain. Even if you've done this, you're separating the right truma, what's needed for the oil, we're still worried. Why? Because the man Charan Love, okay, next time, you won't do it. You'll separate based on the olives. So if the Chachamim said that Afrosh is not Chal, even if you separate the right amount. Not only that, and there's also Chashash, another worry, the Chavrei Chamile. Your friend will see you separating truma from olives for oil, and he'll also separate from olives for oil. And he'll say to himself, this person's there. This one separated truma enough because of Miskabe the rabbis. Basically what happened is, he had intention to do more with the truma that was needed. He went overboard, he went further. But I don't want to be machmir myself to do more than I need to do. I'll just do my obligation and that's it. And then what will happen? You'll end up separating for the oil based on the olives. So to prevent that, the Chachamim and Masakim, you're separating from the olives for the oil of Truma. Truma is not Chal, even if you separated the right amount. So we don't want you to end up not separating enough, so therefore we said it's not valid. Okay, so he summarizes here. Rabbi Yochanan explains, the reason about Mishnah when you take Truma, olives for oil, doesn't work. It's a Kanas Gezel HaShevet. Machlekes Rav Hanani and Rav Mana what that is. And within Torah, one who takes Truma, olives for oil, or grapes for wine, b'diavad it works. But because of Gezel HaShevet, again it's the bother, the mafkia, they took away the Truma being effective. And they said the Truma that you mafresh is tevel, and therefore you can separate from it for other tevel. Okay. Elsewhere we learn in Yerushalmi Gittin from the reasoning of Rabbi Yochanan to our Mishnah that the Truma is not chal, it's a kanas chachamim Gezel HaShevet, because the chachamim can be oikeh something from the Torah. They can remove the status of something from the Torah. Remember, Babli only holds that you can remove something oikeh from the Torah when it's sheval taseh. Yeah, just don't do it. But they can't necessarily just cancel everything. Okay. Only 2 dots coming? Not really. Yeah, there's one there. Okay. Now we come to the view of Beis Shammai and our Mishnah. According to Beis Shammai, when you take truma olives for oil, although the truma is not chal on the oil, basically it helps to be masak in the olives. Okay, it does help to masakin the olives. So you're taking olives for oil, you're masakin the olives. Now the ring of machlekes Amoraim, what about cases where the truma is not chal? I mean, what you masakin the olives here? The truma is not chal? What's going on? Chizki said, Amru, when did Beis Shammai say that the truma is in itself, ela bezeisim ala shemen, when you separate olives for oil, but anovim ala yain, and grapes for wine? Okay, so then Beis Shammai holds the truma is not chal on the oil and the wine, but it helps to masakin the olives and the grapes. Or b'shar kol advarim, but other things where truma is not chal, let's say chiyuv for p'tur, it doesn't work, it's not effective, then lie. They never said the truma is in itself. In that situation, the truma is not chal at all, right? Olives for oil, we're saying it helps for the olives. But other cases, chiyuv for p'tur doesn't help at all, not even for itself. Rav Yechon said, Lo shani, no, there's no difference. The same thing applies. Zeisim ala shemen, anovim ala yain, olives for oil, grapes for wine. Shar kol advarim. The same thing with other things as well. So just like separating truma from olives for oil and grapes for wine, Beis Shammai holds that the truma is not chal on the oil and the wine. Nevertheless, it's chal on the olives and the grapes. You've got Hashem truma on them. So in other situations where as far as truma is not chal, based on you wanted certain wishes, it's not happening, but they hold that the truma is chal on the fruit itself, which you gave it a name. Chevraya, b'shem Rav Yochanan, they said the name of Rav Yochanan, Beis Shammai hold you separate olives for oil, truma is in there, afilu alata, even if you're separating olives for olives and oil, in one go. You hear that? Olives for olives and oil in one go. Now he explains what does it mean the truma is in it? What does that mean? So he says like this: Hanania, Rabbi Yerushalmi, Rabbi Yochanan, the divrei Beis Shammai, according to Beis Shammai, when you're separating truma from olives for olives and oil, the truma is chal on the olives and also on, let's say, the olives in this big container, and also on the olives which are like in your hand, as it were, basically the ones next to you. He says here, if it's not chal on the oil, so some of the olives in your hand is tebel, but the truma is chal on this chelek apart from the other olives. You know what? I think we will look at this again tomorrow. Okay, everybody say we'll go.